Okay. Welcome everyone to the August 7th meeting of the Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee meeting. To those people that are on our Zoom screen, we have some camera issues that have been happening here in chambers, so you're not going to see close-ups of our, fascinating faces today. You're going to see just that one shot of the whole legislature chambers. First, I wanted to mention that Randy Brown is asked to be excused today, so he will not be here. We only have 4 of the 7 members here in chambers, so we do have quorum. So we will continue. And the first item up is minutes approval from May 1st, which was the last time we met. Does anybody move the minutes from May 1st? Deborah Dawson, Susan Curry, seconds. Any discussion about the minutes? Okay, we're going to do roll call votes today. I see Mike Sigler has joined us remotely, so we're going to have to do, that's not roll call, roll call, yeah. The roll call. So can we have a vote on the minutes, please? Oh, I'm going to do it, right. Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Susan Curry.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that's 5. All right. Next up, our contracting updates. Who's going to be giving us that information?
That would be me.
Hello, Tracy. Tracy Verrier
Good
from
morning.
MRB Group, the consultant that is working with us on this. You're on.
Yeah, so there was a update in the packet. We have had a little bit of progress even since then, so that's good. We are currently at, we still have 60 fully executed. We now have 2 that are signed and waiting to be executed by the county. Well, not waiting. The county is working on executing them on that end. And we've got 2 that we're still working out some of the details with. They've not submitted any documents yet. And then 2 that there are partial submissions. And so we're in pretty good shape. We're still making progress. And yeah, that's where we are.
Great. Thank you. Questions for Tracy? All right. So is it true to say that there are 4 without a signed contract?
There are 4 without a signed contract, correct?
All right.
Um,
So fair to say that 2 of them we expect to be resolved pretty soon?
yeah, so one of them had a contract and then we had to make an amendment to it. So one of them has already been through the contracting process and now it's just kind of flipped back because we had to make an amendment to the scope and we're expecting to receive the amendment back any day now. So it's really 3 that are still outstanding. We're going to talk about Cayuga Medical later in the agenda. That's one of them. And then the other 2 are from the second batch. So those aren't in as much of a time crunch.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's move on to the next item then on the agenda, which is reporting and vouchering update.
So that'll be Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Just to give you a quick update in the second quarter, the county has approved and paid 5 requests. We currently are working between Samantha and I on 12 open requests, getting additional information and documentation that they need. So that'll be a total of 17 that have been submitted. And then we have 5 that I'm working on in some level of collecting their correct documentation and information. They haven't submitted any reports yet, so they had questions on what they needed to provide. So we're trying to get everything together for them to submit their first request. So it's going good. There is some back and forth for information that they need to provide that's acceptable, but we're working on getting all that taken care of.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Any questions or comments for Scott? All right. Thank you. Next up are some project updates. So let's start with Cayuga Medical Center. Tracy, you want to take this?
Sure. So Cayuga Medical Center, they were working through the project details. They didn't get some funding that they had were hoping to get. So they're in their kind of plan B, and they were getting through the planning for that. And currently they do have the contract in their hands. We had a call with them a couple of weeks ago to go over some of the language in the contract. And their lawyer is looking and making a couple of suggested revisions that will be reviewed by the county staff and the county attorney. But we're still waiting on those comments back.
Right. So it had been progressing a little slowly, but progressing. And then their attorney was on vacation. Their attorney said they would get comments to us by the end of last week. And we don't, either they didn't or we don't know if we got them yet. But regardless, it's moving. It's just moving clunkily. And eventually we'll have to sit down. Somebody will have to sit down and make sure the contract works for both parties. I would also mention that when this topic has come up, some people have asked, well, is their project, this is the Crisis Stabilization Center, is that still on track? Because they didn't get some of the funding they were hoping. And I don't have a good update for that, but I do want to say that Marty Stallone, the CEO of Cayuga Health Systems, is going to be coming to the September 18th Health and Human Services Committee meeting. And it's open session. We can ask him anything we want. And this is one of the two topics that I told him that I would like to talk about. So I think that feels to me like plenty of time, and we'll get a good, we'll have a chance then to ask him any question we want. Deborah.
Yeah, I'm just concerned. I'd like to know how substantial the shortfall is in their funding, given that they're not getting the money they expected from another source. And I'd like to get an idea of what Plan B looks like. Does it change the?
So I actually just sent this to my message. Plan B was in the original application. It's really more or less the same project, just what they're using this funding for is a little bit different. So they were hoping to get the construction funding from the other funding source and use this for additional programming. And then, so now they're looking at using this for the construction funding and getting the center up and running, as opposed to adding another layer of programming for the center.
Thank you. That's very reassuring.
Veronica.
Thanks, everybody. So I guess just to clarify, if we go back and look at their application and look at the Plan B, and that's basically what they're looking at now.
Correct.
Okay. And second question, I feel it's not the same, but the most similar facility to this, other than like the ER, I guess, is that we have in our community is the alcohol and drug centers. What is it called? I want to say
It's
like
basically
detox.
Detox.
Yeah.
walk-in detox.
Which the construction came along great, but the staffing for programming is coming along poorly because of widespread issues. No fault to ADC. Is this a concern for the Cayuga Medical Center project as well?
Would be.
I'll take that one. I'm sure it is. And that's certainly something we can ask next month when we have Marty Stallone in the room. How's that?
I'll take it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, can someone remind us of the timeline of this ARPA money, when projects need to be committed by, when they need to be started by, when they need to be finished by?
So we had set a deadline for these applications, this first round applications of June 30th to be contracted. So theoretically, at this point, this body could consider not funding the program. Based on the conversation, I don't think that's where we're going here. But the funds need to be committed. I'm going from memory here, so Michael, jump in if I get this wrong, but the funds have to be committed by the end of 2024 and then spent by the end of 2026. So we would.
Once you commit at the end of 2024, they can't be moved.
Yeah.
So whatever you've committed to at the end of 2024 has to be spent for that.
Okay, that still gives us plenty of time to figure all this out. All right. So anything else anyone about the Cayuga Medical Center issue? All right. Let's keep going then. The next thing up is the Challenge Workforce Solutions Scope Update Request.
Yes, so I think it made it into your packets. They sent an email explaining that there was a regulatory change and they can no longer realistically deliver on the scope that was originally proposed. They have proposed an alternative, and basically it's to divert the funding to a project that meets the same goals, but in a different way. So they are asking, and so basically their program was working with transitioning students with special needs to employment and college. And now they're just proposing on doing that through a different programmatic service that they offer. So they are looking at a pre-employment services to students and pre-employment transition services for pre-vocational service that are authorized by Access VR, and they're part of the overall WIOA regulation. That includes job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary options, workplace readiness skills, and instruction in self-advocacy. So it's going to get to the same idea of helping students transition from being in a school environment where they have kind of ongoing support and services into a post-secondary worlds where maybe they're not talking to teachers and counselors every single day. Instead, they're working and they're going to college and have a different set of resources available to them. So preparing them for that transition. So again, kind of the same set of goals, just a different way of meeting them. But since the program is changing a little bit, we just wanted to run this by the committee to make sure you're comfortable with that switch.
Thank you. Committee, are we comfortable with that switch? I'm seeing nods. Mike Sigler, if you had something to say, this would be a good moment.
No, that sounds good.
Okay, great. It sounds like we have consensus on that. I agree too. I'll also point out that the reason that they had to make the switch has to do with state regulations changing, and I think we can sympathize with that situation. Deborah.
But this raises an interesting question about the deadlines that we just heard about. So we can reallocate funds under ARPA until that 12/24 or 12/31/24 deadline. But at that point, whatever allocation is in place cannot be changed, right?
That is what Scott just told us, as I understood it.
Okay, so my question, I guess, is if we had a situation like this one arise where we didn't want to change the allocation in terms of the recipient, but the recipient couldn't go forward with the project we had initially approved and wanted to use it for something else, would we be allowed to change the allocation to that extent, or would the funds then have to go back to Treasury, I guess?
So in other words, if it stayed with the same recipient, is that
Right, but they
okay?
used it for something else.
Anybody from MRB Group want to field that question?
There's not any quote unquote case law that we can rely on because this is a new thing. But
Right.
our understanding is that you'd be able to do it. The encumbrance is with respect to the applicant, with respect to the recipient. So you've encumbered the funds. You've just simply allowed a change in the scope of work related to it. So I think you would be safe within that.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Mike Sigler, did you have your hand up?
I did, just because I seem to remember way back when, so I guess I'm a little confused. Way back when, we took all the money in, we allocated it out already, and then we decided to come up with this program so that we wouldn't have to do all the reporting requirements under ARPA. Wasn't that the case?
We had originally done that, and then we had to switch back to this system, and I've lost some of the details myself.
Okay,
Well, yeah, my recollection was we had initially allocated a huge chunk of it to cash for capital.
right,
We also wanted to do this community recovery fund, and we were going to use fund balance for that.
right.
Then we found out that there would be gifting problems if we used fund balance. And the gifting provisions don't apply to the ARPA fund. So basically, we just switched things around. So we used that fund balance we had allocated for this program for cash for capital and took money out of the cash for capital allocation of ARPA funds to use for this program.
Norm, did you want to add to that, or did you nail it?
Only to say that there is no allocations from the ARPA funds that do not have to be reported. Every dollar that we use has to be reported in some way. So this didn't save us any time or anything like that. We are still having to do those reports.
Well, except that MRB is doing the monitoring and compliance work that we would otherwise have to do. So thank you for doing that.
Absolutely, yeah. We just have to do the federal reporting. I say we, Samantha in our office has to do all the federal reporting, yeah.
Okay. No, I was
When
still
you-
like stuck on the whole, we did it cash for capital, and then we were pulling this out of county money and not ARPA money. So, okay,
When you were going to do it with fund balance, that would have avoided all the reporting requirements, but because that's not legal, when you went back to using ARPA money, then you have to do the reporting requirements.
gotcha. All right, thanks.
They get you one way or
Yeah, I
another.
was gonna say, I'm trying to think of a good
Very
proverb.
good. Yes, and one thing I will add is the vast majority of the projects are scheduled to be done by the end of 2024. So we should know well in advance that there's going to be a problem with any of them. A few of them have December 2024 deadlines, but there's only 2 that go beyond that December 31st, 2024.
Any other discussion about the Challenge Workforce Solutions grant? Okay, so we had unanimous nodding of the heads on that one.
Great.
Next item up is the available funding. So we have $6,000 that has not been claimed. This was by Ithaca Media Arts, I think it was called, declined our grant, and that's $6,000. And so we're going to have to decide what to do with that. Tracy, before we jump into that, is there anything else you want to say about that one?
Yeah, I think so. Just so everyone is aware, the $6,000, when they really started looking at the reporting and everything, they just decided that they were going to fund that other ways. And, it was just a matter of them doing a little bit of a cost benefit analysis on their capacity.
So as far as what to do with that $6,000, I can think of three ideas, and then maybe there are more. So one is that we would give it to the next applicant on the list that didn't get funded. And in this case, it is Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The project is the Tompkins County Micro Enterprise Grant Project. They had asked for a minimum of $35,000, so 6,000 does not reach that minimum. But anyway, that is one option. Second option is to take no action at this time with the thought that we're probably going to get some other money back somewhere along the way. And rather than dole out $6,000 now and some amount later, we just can pool it all together. And then, I'd also just say another possibility is to decide we're going to take this money and use it against the administrative fee and take that, not use it for direct programming. Those are the three options I thought of. So first of all, are there other options people have thought of? And second of all, what would you like to do? Veronica.
Thank you. I would like to do option 2, where we just hang on to the 6,000 for a little while. under the expectation that like maybe some more money will come back, especially with, you know, our biggest contract still outstanding, and 6,000 is pretty small in the scope of this. And then I just have one little clarifying question about the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce Micro Enterprise Grant programs. It says on the spreadsheet here, their minimum request was $35,000, but I recall they've also gotten some money already, and I don't have that in front of me. Is the minimum? Can you just like give a recap of what they've asked
Yeah.
for already?
Yeah, so they used the initial funding that they received because their application had 3 things in it. They used the initial funding to cover one of those 3 things. And then if they were awarded the 35,000, that's the minimum they need for the second piece. Hold on, let me go back here real quick to my notes. So I believe what they did is they funded, I should have had this open. So they had the micro enterprise, they had a workforce program, and they had a tourism program. And I believe the first funding they received, they funded the tourism program. If they received this $35,000, they would do the workforce program. And the micro enterprise, just because that's a regrant, it just requires a larger amount of funding to be worthwhile. So I believe that's how we broke it down at this point.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions, Deborah?
I agree with Veronica. I think at this point in the process, we're still a good 16 months from the deadline for allocation. And we've got one big project out there that we don't know whether it's a go or not. And we just ought to wait because the logistics and details of awarding $6,000 somewhere just doesn't seem to be worth the time. If we end up with no place else to put that, then I'm perfectly happy to apply it towards MRB's expenses and costs.
Susan?
I agree. I like the idea of using some of the funds to cover the administrative fee. And I'm sure that there will be more money that we end up with. So we might be able to do both, cover the administrative fee and offer some more funding to another organization. So I think it'd be good to hang on to it.
So, Mike Sigler, if you have anything to say, this would be a good moment.
Yeah, no, I'm good with holding on to it, but yeah, I mean, I would like to see it go out the door. I would rather not see it spend on administrative costs, but yeah, I don't mind holding on to it for now.
So I also think we should hold on to it. So that's unanimous. We will hold on to it for now, no decisions, but we haven't decided what we will do with it eventually. We're just going to hold on to it for now. Everyone's comfortable with that. Great.
Just one clarifying comment, the initial Tompkins Chamber funding went to a Live Work program, which is a workforce recruitment program.
Great. Okay, then the next item on the agenda is process for projects completed under budget, Newfield Public Library. Tracy, you want to help us on this one?
So the Newfield Public Library was awarded funding on behalf of multiple libraries to acquire equipment that will allow them to do more remote and hybrid programming. So things like projectors, cameras, microphones, technology for hybrid and remote programming. They did end up coming in a little bit under budget and have some funding that they are asking to be able to use for items that support that original technology. So like cables and cords and cases for their projectors and those types of things. So things related to the original scope, just kind of taking it the next step. And so they're requesting to be able to use the money they were already awarded and didn't spend on some additional items. This brings up the larger programmatic question of if projects do a great job and come in under budget, can they still use that funding and how do we want to handle that process? Scott, do you have something to add on the Newfield Public Library?
I would just say additionally, we would have to extend their deadline too, because their deadline had expired in their contract. So, but they were good about it. They used cost savings and came on their budget. I did reach out to them for a list of what they'd like to purchase, but I hadn't received that before this meeting, so.
How much are we talking here?
Scott, do you remember? I think it was like $2,000 or something like that.
No, I think it was around 6. I think it was just under 7.
Well, I mean, I certainly wouldn't object if grantees have additional uses that relate to the original purpose of the grant. But I think if we're going to talk about a process for when this happens generally with grants, we ought to consider the amount of money that's left over, probably not just in and of itself, but as a percentage of the original grant before we decide how we're going to go forward. Because I think if it's a de minimis amount, and I guess we could argue about what that would look like. If it's a de minimis amount, then by all means, I think if there's an additional use that would enhance the original purpose, that should be fine. But if it's a large amount of money, I think that's different. I don't know what other people think. I guess I'm just looking for a threshold.
Veronica.
I agree with Deborah. That wasn't what I was going to say. Was that a question to be answered first, though?
Well, certainly I'm just offering my opinion, but it's going to be a committee decision, and I think everybody should have some input.
So I guess I have a general question, but maybe based on this specific project. I don't recall the details of the Newfield Public Library's proposal, but I don't think that in general the applications were itemized to the level of like this much money for this like piece of technology and this much money for a cable and whatnot.
There's
I haven't
was.
seen,
Yeah.
what'd you say? Oh,
There's was, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. I guess my general question is, I haven't seen any of the contracts. So when you're doing the contracts, do they get down to a more detailed level of what should be spent on than what we saw in the applications?
The applications are attached. So, in this case where it was kind of itemized like that, it is part of the contract. In cases where it's not, where it just says like, oh, we're going to use it for staff to do XYZ, that's, I think to your point is a little bit more flexible, but, in this case, it was pretty itemized. They had a listing of items and that was attached to the contract.
So there would have to be a contract amendment in order for them to use the money for something over and above what was in the original list.
Yeah, and it would be a pretty simple amendment. We'd push out the date. We would say they're going to get additional items to support the original application. And it would be probably a 1-page amendment. It wouldn't. It's not a huge process.
It's $5,769 left over.
From what was the original grant?
42,240.
So it's about 13%.
Yeah, about 13%. Yep.
Yeah.
Veronica, were you done?
And their application was detailed right down to each of the 6 libraries, what they would buy each library, right down to the number of cords and everything. So they did what they said they would do: cart, sound bar, 25-foot cord, cable, projector screen, broke down to each library. And then that's how they submitted their bills as well.
Props to Newfield Library.
No kidding.
So Veronica, you're done. Deborah, did you have more to say?
No, I just wanted to.
Susan, did you want?
I think that I like what Deborah said. I agree. And I think it is very hard when you write a project list and you go through and you do the research. Technology changes so quickly. I'm not surprised that there were changes and they found that there were changes in costs of everything. So I agree with what you're proposing.
So
They use coupons and rebates and discounts. They documented all of it for us.
Libraries are very good at finding a deal.
So I guess procedurally, we ought to first decide if we want to let them have the additional or the original funding amount, as long as they can justify how they're spending it. But then I guess we have the bigger question of what kind of a threshold do we want to set for similar situations that other grantees might experience?
Mike Sigler, did you want to weigh in?
No, I think the discussion has been good, Dan. I think we're good.
Yeah. So I also agree with the prevailing thought here that we should definitely say this is fine. I'm hesitant to try to craft an actual policy at this moment. I'm comfortable, at least for now, with saying the idea we'd handle it on a case-by-case basis. Because I don't know exactly how we would do it at this time. Veronica.
I'm also comfortable with that for now. And if we were going to do a policy, I feel like an option might be defining some sort of de minimis amount. And I'm just inferring the meaning of that. I'm not a lawyer. To be maybe like, if the amount of money is both under a certain absolute value and also under like X percentage of the original grant, then, or first of all, I would say if any changes that don't require a contract amendment I guess it's not really a change. If it requires a contract amendment, maybe like the committee should be notified, but we don't have to do anything to approve it if it's below some amount. And if it's above some amount, maybe it needs our approval. I don't know if anything goes to the full legislature approval. I don't, okay. That's not like a full-on proposal, but that's the skeleton of one.
Well, I would suggest hold those thoughts. And if the situation arises again, we'll pull those thoughts back out, but it may not even arise again. You know? I'm not sure anyone else is clipping coupons. And I agree. Kudos to Newfield for doing, for coming under budget. We want to incentivize that. Okay. Any further discussion on this topic? All right. So that actually completes our agenda. I have a couple of things I'm going to announce, then I'll see if there's anything else that we need to take care of while we're here today.
Dan, before you go on, was that an approval for us to drop a new contract amendment for them?
Yes.
I don't know if we got it official.
Yes. If
Okay.
anyone feels like we need to vote on that, we can. I feel like we don't, but I'm okay if someone wants.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. So let's see. The original plan for this committee had been to meet quarterly. We did meet a couple extra times right at the beginning of the year because we had some issues to work out, but we haven't met since May. That was 3 months ago. And our next scheduled meeting is November 6th. So make sure that's still on your calendar. We also had asked originally if you would block out this time slot, this first Monday of the month, every month, just in case we do need to meet, but definitely plan on meeting November 6th. The other thing I want to mention is you might as well, I know most of you are not paper people like I am, but you might want to just tear out the last sheet of this agenda and hold on to that, because that information is actually not available publicly. I don't mean it's secret. It's not in this order that I know of anywhere else. And that this is a useful piece of information going forward. If it turns out we have more money, you'll want to look at that sheet of paper. So that's my little suggestion. Hold on to that sheet. Any other business before this committee today? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for a quick and easy but good meeting. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
35 minutes.